To open that page, I'll search for my fix, find what I need in the deep dark abyss.
How's it going?
It's great. How are you, Cass?
I'm great. I did my hair myself. This is my first by myself haircut, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's
You're killing it.
The last time I did it, it was like, first of all, I got help. And then second of all, it was kind of a shelf, like right here and in the back too. And now I kind of figured out how to fade it a little bit. Like I don't want to bring too much attention to it because it's not perfect, but I'm pretty happy with it.
It's
also
very good.
I've been swimming a lot, so it's not very well blue. It's kind of faded blue, but I like faded blue.
I was noticing that it seems to match the blue of your knitting like incredibly well.
Oh yeah,
Bluish green.
That's not a coincidence. And it's not just this color. This is like a 20 color blanket I'm making for my mom, and I'm obsessed with it. So I'll be knitting from in every call from now on. Is that okay with you?
Well, that's like, we should introduce the, many folks at home to our shtick, which includes you knitting, right?
Yeah, that's the inner self. It's like my inner self it's like I'm either knitting or thinking about knitting when I'm hanging out with you. When I say you, I mean literally anyone listening. That's who I am. And it's just a nervous habit / a very creative. Sometimes I really think of it as like a creative hobby, and other things I'm just like, no, it's self-medication in a certain way.
If we all had a nervous habit that was as generative and good for other people as your knitting, then the world would be a better place.
Just create a lot of sweaters.
Yep.
Yeah. And blankets. Yeah. So we should mention that we are doing a podcast now called the AI Skeptics. We have a lot to get to today. I want to start, if that's okay. I've got a topic.
Please.
Which is trust. I was just thinking about it this morning, like the reason I started this podcast with you, AI Skeptics, is not because I'm skeptical about AI, which I am, but because I want other people to be skeptical about AI. And it occurred to me that this is like kind of a full circle of like why I wrote Weapons of Math Destruction back 10 years ago, and I really decided to write it like 2012 or 2011 even. Like I decided a long time ago that people trusted algorithms too much. And it was like blind trust. Like people, like the hype, the sort of marketing of algorithms back then was like, oh, computers can't be biased because they don't have human bias. They just don't. So you can just trust them. And I was like, but because the data is collected by humans about human behavior, and we're just like blah, blah, blah. So like the reason I wrote that book and the reason I gave the TED Talk was because I was like, everyone trusts algorithms to be fair and equitable, and they're being used by every bureaucracy. Like right now, every bureaucracy is like, getting a job, getting into college, getting insurance, like how much you pay for insurance, like getting fired, going to prison, like all of the bureaucracies were adopting algorithms back then. And they loved the cover that was given to them by this hype marketing that like things were really fair, because it meant when algorithms inevitably made mistakes and very, very bad mistakes, like they didn't have to feel responsible because they were like, well, we trusted the algorithm because that's what we were told we could do. So it was like this really great thing where they could, it was multifold why it was so great for them. Cause like they could like fire a bunch of people who used to make difficult decisions, replace them with an algorithm, and then not take blame when the algorithm fucked up.
Right.
While the public was like the whole being like, this is great. Like, thank you so much for like not inserting human bias into this because you're using an algorithm, So it was just like a complete, circle. And like what ended up happening, of course, is like, in some sense, it was the trust that we placed in algorithms made the bureaucracies actually worse. Like right now, what I'm describing, it sounds like it's like, oh, it just continued the same thing, but with algorithms instead of people, which is to some extent true. But the added layer of trust on top of like what we'd already been doing, but automated, is that like people didn't question it anymore, right? People didn't say, hey, why should I trust this score? Why should I believe you? Like the skepticism. And it just made me realize, even back then, like skepticism is good. Skepticism is like a natural way for us to sort of like double check our heavy decisions and inject things to the extent that we can, like inject things with like a systems of appeal. And
Right.
by the way, I'm not claiming that like up to us to appeal algorithms, which are by construction opaque, and often we don't even know they're happening.
Right. That's the point you made.
It's not like I'm trying to put the response
in weapons, that oftentimes people don't even know they're being scored by these systems or being evaluated or assessed by these systems. So it's like, even before trust, are you even aware that, this bureaucracy has been given over to an algorithm? And maybe the people who handed it over trusted the algorithm, but the people being scored by it didn't even know the difference, And I wonder about that now in the age of AI with customer support chatbots. Like, do people even really know or appreciate, who's on the other end of that conversation?
Well, okay, yeah. So you're getting to the end of my rant. Thank you. Which is that like, I feel like my book was the beginning, but really there are just tons of examples and other books and magazine articles, and technology reporting got better and journalism got better, and like onto this. And eventually, after 8-9 years, like people were skeptical of algorithms, right? But then enter AI and this whole new hype cycle of trust us, and somehow that works again, And it's like, wait a second, what the fuck just happened? Like we'd finally sort of built a healthy skepticism into the whole like algorithmic economy, after quite a lot of work. And now we have AI. And I feel like a lot of the marketing for AI, it's not exactly the same. It's not as bald faced as like, you could trust it because it's a computer, which is, we know that's stupid. It's much closer to like, you can trust it because it's human. It's like, it's this weird, like roundabout, like you should trust it because it might be conscious. I mean, which is stupid, as we're going to mention a bunch of
future
times.
episode
but like,
coming up. I want you to say more about this phenomenon that you wrote about in Weapons, where it's like people are intimidated by the mathiness and the formulas of big data. And I'm wondering what that looks like in the age of AI, because it's a little different. Like what the AI spits out and that we overbelieve is not really formulas. It's more like natural language. So I'm just wondering about like how do you think about how that happens? How do people get fooled? How do they end up trusting too much? Because it feels like maybe it's a different mechanism at work.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's both different and the same. Like this, here's what's the same. Oh my gosh, I don't even know what just happened. That was just some kind of special effects on the visual. But what was the same is that like back then, you're right. Like you were basically told, oh, it's math, you wouldn't understand it. In fact, that's exactly what Curie was told when she was trying to figure out like how her teachers were being assessed as a Brooklyn High School principal. And you don't have that exact phenomenon happening now, but what you do have is this constant drumbeat of like, oh, the Silicon Valley engineers are so brilliant. They're almost magically brilliant, right? And that's why like you've been hearing Mark Zuckerberg is like poaching them from other AI companies for absolutely crazy money because these guys are so amazing. Whereas like probably what's really amazing is just how much data is being stolen and harvested from the internet. And I'm not saying there's nothing technical about AI. For sure there is. But a lot of it's hardware. A lot of it is like the NVIDIA chips. Like there's a lot going on here, but it's not that engineers just got 10 times smarter in the last few years. That's just not what happened, right?
Right.
So there's still that phenomenon of like, oh, you wouldn't understand how it works, which is true. I mean, even the engineers don't understand how it works. But then you go one step further. It's like, oh, because even the engineers don't really understand how it works, it does seem kind of magical. And like, that's when you start, like, you remember that weird Google engineer who actually was an early bird in falling for the notion that AI, that large language models were conscious.
Yes.
And that happened a few years ago. And like, and people in Google were like, oh, never mind. Like he's being treated at a mental health facility or something. But now that's actually, I think at some point they caught on and they're like, oh, actually that's great, because that means if it's magic, like you can trust it. Like you can't understand it. If it's magic, it's like nobody should have to explain it. It's just a leap of faith,
I feel like they're doing both. Like I agree with what you're saying. I think the hype is ratcheted up even more to say you wouldn't understand it. It's so high level that it is basically magic. And it's true. The engineers that build this stuff admit that they don't know how it works on the inside, really. In parallel, while that hype is going on, like, I think especially the chat style, natural language style outputs of AI have their own kind of magic built in. That is like the magic of conversational language that's kind of hardwired into us as people. So that's a topic that I'll return to often. But I think it's part of the blind trust phenomenon here, because I think we, the people that gobble up the generations of chatbots, we are hardwired to treat it as conversational, to like treat it, less critically than we would treat a math formula. It's sort of hitting us right in a weak spot in our defenses, which is conversations, casual.
You know what? I do want to save that conversation for another time. Like, exactly how is it exploiting our natural human responses? It's a great conversation, great question. I just wanted to like finish off this topic and move on to the next one on saying that like just the lack of skepticism is a problem. Like the lack of skepticism and of course the greed that accompanies the kind of hype cycle and investment boom that we've seen in AI, where people are just like, I'm going to get rich, don't ask questions, Yeah. That's accompanies it. But it's like this, it's almost like a campaign of blind trust. And a campaign of blind trust is the opposite of asking the best questions and being skeptical in the right ways and deciding, wait, we should put some basic checks and basic monitors in place before just like turning this on and putting it in charge of us. I guess I'll just finish by saying that like the dystopian weirdos in Silicon Valley cults are talking about how AI is going to become self-conscious and try to destroy us all. But that's not how it's going to roll. If something terrible happens, it's because we did it. It's because we're like, let's hand over our choices to the AI, which we've never questioned sufficiently. That is my dystopian fear. And it's going to be brought on by our lack of skepticism and our blind faith. So kind of just wanted to mention like the genesis of like this podcast. Why are we talking about AI skepticism? I think we desperately need it. It's like a tool in our tool belt that we need to like sharpen.
Yeah. And to your point about like, hey, we should install some monitors. We should be keeping track of this stuff. I'll just add that it's part of the hype cycle, the hype vortex, that any attempt to study these systems or measure them or put monitors on them are generally gobbled up by the companies making the systems. So they end up saying, well, we're the only people that understand it well enough to study it and measure it to be sure it's safe. So it's, we're really lacking that independent, outside, skeptical monitor.
Yeah. Well,
Thank God for our podcast. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's also a topic for another day, which is like why almost anybody could be that monitor. But you had an idea of what to talk about today, so I don't want to pause.
Yeah, I want to talk about one thing, which is a pretty recent piece of news I read about in Matt Stoller's newsletter. Matt Stoller is a anti-monopoly commentator, and he wrote about the decision that came out that Meta beat a court case where they were accused of being a monopolist. The judge declared they're not a monopolist. So it's kind of a win for big tech in the antitrust world. And I liked what Matt Stoller wrote about it. It made me think of two things. One is that he goes into why Meta was able to beat the case, or what the judge wrote in their opinion. And the judge was saying, Meta hasn't really monopolized this particular market. It came down to the question of what market? Are we talking about? What are we talking about? Well, they started out by saying that when the case was filed, it's like Meta has monopolized the social networking market. The case was filed 4 or 5 years ago, and the lawyers took a long time, slowing it down. So by the time the decision was rendered, TikTok, for example, had emerged. Like TikTok was never mentioned in the original complaint because it wasn't a thing yet 5 years ago. But then it became a thing during the case, and the market. Was this like started like when Facebook got Instagram or something like that? It was I think 2019 maybe was the genesis of it. It might have even been pre-Biden, but it was like Lina Khan FTC, and then Lina Khan jumped on it and made it a bigger thing. But the decision showed that whatever market they originally had said Meta was monopolizing, it changed because, like everything in this space, social media and big tech, like they're constantly changing what they do to respond to what people will consume. So 5 or 7 years ago, maybe Meta was not in the business of short form videos, but now they're very much in the business of short form videos because they have to compete with TikTok. And like, that's what people want, right? So the decision showed that antitrust law is not nimble enough to follow the tech companies as they jump from doing one thing to doing another thing. Right. And that's where the judge, based their decision, according to Matt Stoller, is like, well, when the complaint was filed, it was about this market, but, clearly the complaint didn't take account of what's going on now. So we have to throw this out, So I really just I like that point that Matt Stoller is observing, that he's saying like antitrust is a really good framework for finding a problem with big concentrated power in companies. But at least the way we do it in the US, it relies on this notion of a market that can be monopolized, and then you study what the monopolist is doing and how the prices are getting worse or the consumers, are getting harmed. And then you make your case. But it all rests on that definition of a market, and it's just too rigid, and it's not keeping up with what we have today. Like what we should be thinking about, it maybe, is a market for attention or a market for our time on devices. I'm not sure how to think about the market, or maybe we need a whole new idea. Yeah, I was going to say, I think we need a new idea. To be honest, like most of the harms that I see on social media are, look, let me say it this way. Facebook isn't a monopoly, in my opinion. Like it was trying to be by picking up Instagram, it was trying to get there. It was just trying to own everything. Mm-hmm. But then you had Snap, and then TikTok came in, and
what is clear because of TikTok's success is that it's not only one company, but it doesn't matter. It's like it's damaging to society in a real way without it being a monopoly. And I'll add something else, which is that, like, you know, I've worried since I learned about these like fintech companies like making loans, you know, to what people call underbanked people. I've been worried about like racism in loans and like like higher interest rates going to poorer people or to people of color. That's also not a monopoly problem, right? Like, because every single company does exactly the same thing. It's I guess what I'm saying is, like, it's not a monopoly problem. It's not that one company owns everyone's attention. It's that every company is doing exactly the same thing. That's the problem. And from the perspective of the consumer or the customer, it doesn't matter if you go to this company or that company or a third company, because they're all going to treat you the same shitty way. And that's not antitrust law. Antitrust law only thinks about market power in a given market. So I feel like we just actually need a different theory.
Okay, I really like what you said. It's kind of a cartel, not a monopolist. But what you said also makes me want to pump up the idea of monopoly so that it works, so that it still fits. So here's what we could do.
Okay.
Another way to describe a monopolist, instead of referring to a very narrow market, is to say it's someone who can exercise like monopoly power, right? Monopoly power means that you're raising the price on consumers or you're lowering the quality on them and they're not running away. And
they don't have, they have no better option.
Right. And that can happen even in a world where there are a few big players, not just one, if all the big players are doing the same thing. But I think it points to another gap in current antitrust setup, which is how do we measure the harm to consumers, right? The loss of quality, traditional monopoly setup has you measuring prices. Like, that's what a monopolist would do. They would jack up the price, get a lot more profits,
right. But
that's not how it's working, because we're obviously not paying for our Gmail and our TikTok and stuff. It's free. So they're not jacking up the price. They are extracting more from us in some other more hidden ways. And I think that antitrust doesn't have good enough tools for measuring those other ways that consumers are harmed. So another big topic that we'll talk about way more in this podcast is like, how do we measure harms carefully? How do we really capture the shittiness of people falling into rabbit holes of depression, of people, of the breakdown of social discourse? How do we capture and quantify some of those things and lay them at the feet of the tech companies that are causing them?
Yeah. Well, and you know what? That brings me to our third and final topic. And I don't know exactly how much time we have, but I'm guessing it's about 5 minutes. So I heard it recently about a poll of young people, like less than 30. And like this, from my perspective, this podcast and any TikToks that are derived from this podcast are aimed at these folks. Like, and it's partly because I live with some of them, as my children and their spouses are around that age. But it's also just because I feel like we have screwed them so badly. And when I say we, I mean like everyone who's above 30. Like all of us. First of all, many of them got either their high school or their college years destroyed during COVID. And then they finally, after doing exactly what they were told to do and getting a good education, like enter the workforce into a place where they have huge student loans, they can't find a job, they can't buy a house. And now AI, so it's attached to AI. And I've been feeling just like dread about their future ever since COVID hit, really. And that's partly because I'm their mom for some of them. But I'm just going to read a couple statistics from this recent poll of young people. And young people are defined by younger than 30. and this is a Harvard youth poll, it's called. More than 4 in 10 under 30 say they're barely getting by. 4 in 10, and 16% said they're doing okay. Fewer than half feel a sense of community. Only 15% believe the country is headed in the right direction. And they all hate politicians, like all of them. They hate both parties. They don't want to have kids. They don't think they'll ever get married. They'll ever have a house. It's like, it is really sad. And I think it's also, it points, and I'm going back to AI here because that's our expertise. It points to something really stupid about the whole AI bubble and it goes back to the point of trust that I was making earlier. Is like, we are as a society just so headfirst, falling over ourselves to get AI to be an intrinsic part of our economy and our investment portfolio, that we're like, oh, we don't need to hire young people. We'll just replace them all with AI. It's not going to work. It's a failure for us just in terms of like the production of what we need to have done in this country, but it's also an absolute betrayal of these young people. Because like, what are they doing? Like, if they can't get in those entry level jobs, then they can't get trained up for the next tier. And by the way, the reverse is also true. If companies don't get entry level people, they won't have anybody trained up to do the next level of work when their old people retire, which is happening. So it's like really short-sighted, but also it's a betrayal. And it's like the topic for me as to why we're doing this.
Well, I'm glad you bring it onto the podcast. It's shocking how little AI companies in particular have to say about that issue that you bring up. Like, I saw recently research, I think it was from OpenAI, studying like AI's performance versus a professional in certain job categories. And they're being like, AI is beating the professionals in 12% of job category, whatever it was, right? And then there was another report recently, the iceberg index of like how many jobs are directly threatened by AI. Like the one that OpenAI published, how dare they just write, oh, we're going to put at risk 12% or 15% of all jobs. Like there was no section of the report that was like, so therefore we are doing XYZ around retraining people or creating new, just like heads up, we're throwing a enormous hand grenade into the jobs scene. Here's a white paper we wrote. I just don't get it. I don't get why that's acceptable. And it does feel like a betrayal.
I feel like there's somebody's PhD thesis has been tracking or will be tracking the way that tech companies have moved from saying that AI is going to help you do your job to now AI is going to replace people working for you. It's like firmly talking to the CEO.
Yeah.
Point. It's like, it's no longer saying, hey, workers, you can trust us. I mean, going back to trust, it's like, nope, we're just talking to the people who have the power to fire you or to never hire you, more to the point.
Ooh, it's almost Braverman time in a future episode.
Ooh, it is almost Braverman time. That's happening. Well, it's great. It's great to talk to you, Jake, as usual. And we talk like 3 times a day. And we're about to talk after this about something else. But it's great to talk to you in the podcast once again. Thanks for...
Same. Thank you. Sorry for the background change, tech difficulties. We'll get it figured out.
Yeah, we will. And I'll get this knitting done too.
See you next time, AI skeptics.